Hello and welcome to my latest video. And instead of doing a Ask the Data Governance Coach video this time, I wanted to do something that dived into a little bit more detail on data literacy, because data literacy is a really hot topic right now. It's all over the internet, all over LinkedIn, and I think it's fair to say that it means slightly different things to different people, but it is a really valuable topic. So I wanted to get somebody along to have a little bit of a chat about it and delve into it a bit more for you to clarify what it is, because data literacy is really important and a key part actually of any data governance initiative. So I've asked Jo Fulford along to join me today, and Jo is one of my senior data governance coach associates, and she has worked for me for a number of years now, and I couldn't think of anybody better to have this chat with. So Jo, would you like to introduce yourself a bit better?
Sure. So I'm Jo Fulford, and as Nicola says, I've worked with her as an associate consultant for a few years now. And we first met when Nicola helped me at the organisation I was working at to implement a data governance framework there. Data literacy still probably wasn't even talked about back then. But obviously it's been a key part of lots of work since then. So should we get started with the questions?
Absolutely. Well, I think the obvious thing to ask you first is, given that I think data literacy does mean different things to different people, what do you consider data literacy is?
Well, for me, I think what it needs to be for your organisation varies massively on what kind of organisation you are, what you do, and how you use data to support that and to do those things. But really critically, it also varies by the different roles that you have in your organisation. And so there's not a one size fits all. This is what data literacy is, and you can roll it out to everybody in your organisation. But you need to really think carefully about what is it that every role in your organisation needs to enable them to work the best that they can with the data that your organisation has. So that can be anything from being a confident user of Excel, if that's relevant to you, or it might be being able to do sort of really complex statistical analysis if you're an analyst, or it might even be, if you're in a senior leadership role, being able to communicate and request the reports or the analytics or the information that you need to be making the decisions that you need to make. So you're not going to be doing the hands-on manipulation of the data, but you need to be able to understand that it's been analysed the appropriate way, using the right kind of data and manipulated the right way, so that it is giving you the information that you actually need, rather than there being a mismatch on what somebody thinks you want and your interpretation of it. So for me, it's all about being able to communicate effectively across your organisation what your requirements are from the data, so that you can make sure that people are actually accessing the information they need, and it is what they understand it to be.
I think that's a really great explanation, Jo, and I think that's really helped make it accessible to people, because I think some people think that it's all about making perhaps everybody in our organisations data scientists and analysts, and of course it's not. It's just giving you those basic skills so that, as you say, you can ask for what you want and really in an articulate way, but also understand that you have got what you asked for. So I think that is a really good point. Thank you. So obviously, with everybody saying, oh, we need everybody in our organisations being data literate, that's not really helpful just as a statement on its own. So why do you think that being data literate is a necessity for organisations to basically be trying to get to a base level of data literacy for their employees?
Yeah, so for me, I think it goes back to that point about being able to communicate effectively. And my background is as a business analyst, and so it's very much that sort of translator role. And so for me, it's about there being that sort of commonality of language, so that it's enabling you to be much more effective and efficient in getting the things done that you need to, whether it's system requirements or resolving issues, or whether it's decision making. And if you have that awareness and that knowledge of what the data is in your organization and how it all fits together and the right terminology to use, it's going to be a lot quicker to get decisions made and the right decisions made. So that's going to give you a competitive advantage, because you're able to be much more effective and efficient.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think you've also got to think about what's in it for your organisation for anything you do, but particularly you shouldn't be embarking on data literacy just because it's the latest hot topic. You know, and you're right, it's got to tie into the overall effectiveness of your organisation, hasn't it? So I think that's really good. So I think, you know, clearly you can do some data literacy training, some comms in your organisation to bring up that level of data literacy. But how would you go about demonstrating that, you know, a level of data literacy has actually been achieved in an organisation?
Well, I think you could start with a survey to try and get like a kind of a benchmark of how people feel about data. So, even if are they even scared by the term data literacy? Because I think a lot of people in an organization would assume it's that they're going to be sent on some training course to learn how to do statistics, and it sounds terrifying. But even to know, for that to have that awareness of what level of awareness even is there of the concept of data literacy, and then asking them some very specific questions about how they use data to do their jobs and what the obstacles are to them being able to use that data. Obviously, you can repeat that after you've done your sort of first round of training and so on. And so it's really doing a simple kind of maturity assessment. So, I mean, if I was sort of starting one from scratch, I'd probably think about the kinds of questions that you'd get in a maturity assessment for any kind of, not just a data initiative, but anything else, and think about, well, what does basic look like for our organisation, for our roles, for our teams, for our activities? And what does improving look like, and what might be quite aspirational, and where might we want to get to, so that you can kind of measure that. So you might already have an idea of where you think you'd like to get to, but you want to have that sort of benchmark of where you started really.
Excellent. No, I think that's a really, really good advice there, because I think you're right. If you don't have a benchmark, how can you actually prove that you've actually changed anything as a result? So no, I think that's really great advice. So yeah, as with all things data, I think things are not straightforward, because I think lots of people have this belief that data is somebody else's problem. I think very few people would tell you that data is not important, but I think for the vast majority of people in an organization, they tend to think that it's not their problem. There's somebody else that will do data for them. So I just wondered, what kind of are the common problems that people encounter when they're implementing, to be fair, any data related activity, but in particular, perhaps a data literacy initiative?
Yeah, I think ownership at the right level is really key. And like for me, it's exactly the same as data governance. Unless you've got that accountability and somebody who's taken it on board that actually it's really important that I drive this, and that this is a way that we should be transforming our culture and the way our organization works, it's going to be really, really hard to get any traction. I think off the back of that, it's not uncommon for there to be resistance or reluctance to engage. I think a lot of organisations, especially in the last couple of years, have gone through massive transformations, and there's a weariness. It's like, oh, something else that we need to change and something else that we need to do. And so I think there is that kind of jostling for attention and resource. And I think quite rightly, some senior leaders will just be turning around and saying, we're not doing anything else. We've got enough on our plates. But again, it's like, well, got to think really, really carefully about those organisational priorities. And so it can be quite difficult to kind of be high enough up their agendas. And I think, and another common thing, and this is the same with data governance again, is that idea of well, this is something we're going to work on for the first half of this year, and then we're done, and it's a tick in the box, and we never have to go back to that again. But actually, it's an ongoing initiative, and so it's not just like, let's make sure that everybody's had one piece of training that's relevant to their role, but how do we embed data literacy in our onboarding program, on our regular annual refresh training for existing staff, how for when people change roles within the organization, and it might be moving up a level, or it might be moving across to something that's sort of quite different to what they've done before, and they might be working with data that they're not so familiar with, or the data might be familiar, but all the other aspects of the work are quite different. So I think those are some of the common problems that you might come across.
Yes, and I think you touched on this point as you were saying that, is that I think sometimes not having the right person responsible or accountable for data literacy can make a huge problem, isn't it? So who do you think should be responsible for introducing and perhaps embedding data literacy in an organisation?
Well, I think it's definitely got to be kind of owned by the business. I think I don't think it's a common problem that it's expected to be owned by IT in the way that there used to be that idea that data was owned by IT. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I think because it's very much driven by business needs, and there's not a generic one size fits all for each individual in your organization. What is going to improve their data literacy is going to be quite different. So it's not something that HR can just kind of pick a product off the shelf and here's a video and everyone can watch it and we've ticked that box. So I would say it's got to definitely be somebody inside the business. Again, you might want to align it with whoever your data owners are, if you've got a data governance framework. But if it's hard to do a big organization-wide approach, then maybe the leadership person in one particular functional area, and just focus on delivering in one area rather than trying to do everything.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, and I think I'd add to that if your organisation is lucky enough to have a chief data officer, then I think clearly they would be spearheading it, but I think they would be liaising with the people that you're talking about, because it's the same with all things data. You can't do everything all at once. You're going to have to do things in phases, or to achieve, just to make it manageable.
Yeah, and you're going to need to again, because there will be other data initiatives going on, you're going to need to revisit it, and it's that constant cycle, isn't it, of you make one change in your governance program, and then you need to change what's happening in your reporting, and then some systems change, and then you've got another round of data literacy to do. So it's everything's constantly shifting all the time.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fair. And I think just to kind of perhaps round this chat off, I was wondering what you thought about how data literacy links into other data management disciplines. Now, you and I have been doing data governance for a number of years now, and I think it's fair to say that we've been doing data literacy as part of that perhaps for years, but we just didn't call it data literacy until more recently. But I just, thought it'd be really useful to ask you, what other things do you think that data literacy links into?
Yeah, I mean, I think analytics is obviously another sort of key area, and it's not just about it being data skills or skills for the analysts, but it's for the people that are requiring or requesting the reports and the analysis from them, so that those people are able to ask for what they need and to be able to give really, really useful, constructive feedback, rather than causing or creating confusion because they're not using the same terminology. But I think also, again, sort of referring back to my background as a business analyst, I think it's also really, really helpful, sort of tying in with system requirements when you're changing your technology, business processes, how does it relate to that? So I think across so many parts of what an organization does, it's very hard to remove it. So it's not just linked to the other data management disciplines, but to all the professional disciplines across the organization, really.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I think, I was preparing for a different presentation the other week, and I was preparing some words in it and saying, data is the lifeblood of all organizations, whatever it is your organization does. And what we really need to do is get people understanding that and being able to articulate what you say, even if it's basic requirements for a new system. And imagine, if you go back a few years, how much easier would your job have been as a BA if the business really knew how to articulate their data requirements of a new system?
Yeah, and it can be really simple things like being able, like, for people to know what the difference is between a field and a record, and its rows and columns and things like that. Just being able to be really confident users of even some of that really basic understanding.
So I think that is excellent, Joe. I knew that having a chat with you would be a really good way to make the topic accessible to everybody. So thank you so much for that. If you're interested in finding out more about data literacy, I'm really pleased to say that I actually have launched data literacy training, and you can access that on my website by following the link that's on the screen now. But thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you, Joe, for sharing your expertise. I am really, really grateful. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you all again here soon for another video. Bye.
Bye.